Welcome to the Dev Banner. This is episode 5 on our tutorial. So let's continue on from last time. And the extra assignment I wanted you to do or work on or try to come up with yourself is number 1, come in and fill out the rest of the terminals for these records. For account column, category, and transaction. And then number 2 was fixing the, refactoring, I should say, the code that we were kind of doing over and over again when it came to the menus. And this is what I came up with. We're going to go into account.go under the terminal records folders. And what I'm doing is I'm just giving a bunch of these array of strings, and I have messages, prompts, and acceptable prompts. Then I actually have this extra exit string, and this could be anything you want. In my case, I put E. So if I go ahead and run the program, you'll see that let me come back over here to the main menu. You'll see that I, first of all, added a transactions, which would be this line right here. And then I'm calling this basic prompt. And if you go into utility, UI, you'll see that I have a bunch of extra stuff that I've added. But basic prompt takes in these array of strings and the exit string and pretty much just displays it for me. And it also does some validation to make sure that if I press anything other than what's available, then I get this, invalid selection, try again, and it stays within this function until I press something that is acceptable. And if you don't send anything in for the exit string, then it just won't print it. So it does a lot of validation for you and does a lot of formatting for you that just seems like we've been doing over and over again. So this is how I refactored that. So coming back to accounts, I integrated that into the main menu. I also kind of alluded to how to grab these a little better, parse input with message. I ended up feeling like we were doing this a lot. So I wrote a one-liner to get, to prompt for something and print a message. And so that's what I came up with. Now this one was pretty simple. It's 2 liners into one, but the refactoring seemed to help a lot. So it cleaned up the code a little bit. And then I actually added some more kind of like, int. I parse with an int to make sure that it's an int. And comparing message floats, stuff like that, booleans, just to make sure that I got most of the cases covered. So let's go on with the new code that is for this week. And let's see, if I come back into main, like I said, I mentioned I added these transactions, and now that we've got our CRUD coming in for accounts, account columns, categories, and transactions, and this transactions CRUD's just in case you want to change something. But what we're going to do is we're going to take a file from your bank or credit card or whatever, and bring it in. And so let me show you some sample data that I will have on with this project. And I have an American Express, and this is one of the months, obviously from last year or 2022. And these are my transactions. And so this is what kind of file you're going to get. You have your date, description, who owns this. My wife and I both have this card, so sometimes her name or my name, I ended up just putting owner in here, the 4 last digits of my account, and the amount. And you'll see that typically they have a header that describes each column that's separated by commas. And so we'll use this and actually let's go to it right now. So in accounts columns, we're specifying for an account, which this file should belong to, what positions we want those 3 main columns: transaction date, description, and amount. We're not going to go over category today. It's going to be we're going to be using that, and sometimes you'll get a category from your institution, your account, but typically not. And so I've given it away to. We'll go over that next video. And so if I go look at my account columns that I set up for my, so I have 2 accounts, this Amex that I'll be looking at. This was just a sample one I put in. And so we're looking at number 1 as the account. So account ID number 1, you'll see that I put position 1 is the transaction date, position 5 is the amount, and position 2 is the description. And just so that you know, like, we're going to eventually be dealing with zero-based indexing. So this is 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. But in purposes of position, most people are like, oh, it's the first position, it's the 5th position. And so so I've put those in there, and I will adjust that in the code. And you'll see that here in a minute. So that's the data. That's what we've set up for to be able to process this file. And let's go into so I already ran some transactions. So I'm gonna go ahead and delete those transactions, and that's a good way. As long as you leave, for testing purposes, if you want to rerun the file, or you can rerun the file and just get the same transactions over and over again. But if you wanted to make it kind of clean, you come into this transaction, clean it out to the brackets, and then you're good. So with that test data, let's go over the terminal. So coming back here, if we press T, we'll go into this case statement, which then says, hey, do we want to load it? So I'm just going to press T right here, and that's this menu right here that we're showing. And the reason I've done this is because even though we have the CRUD transactions, kind of the files that handle the CRUD, I wanted a different screen menu that dealt with just transactions, because I'm going to actually have another option in another later video that will put in this screen. And so it just felt like, here's the records, we want to deal with individual records, and then here's some other functionality that's kind of special that I wanted to just separate. So once you've done that, we're going to call this transaction load, and TRA is terminal transactions, which is this folder right here. So let's look for transaction load. So come into here, and there's this function, and you'll see that once I'm here, I'm going to ask, hey, which file do you want to load? And I predefined this path for us, which is basically the project root, data, and then test data. And so all you have to do is type in this. You download your files that you want to load, you put them in here, name them what you want, come in here, enter in that name, and then path is a package from Go that manipulates the operating system's path, and so that has a bunch of functions. And so what this does is it cleans. So I take the file path, which is this prognos data, I go up, and then I go back down, and all this will do is, this is acceptable, but this just cleans it and makes it so it's just one continuous appropriate path, which would be whatever the system is, prognos data, test data, instead of going down to here, then going back up, type of thing. And so just for demonstration purposes, if I've never talked about stat is from the OS package, and what it does is it gets the stats on this file, and I'm just going to see if it's there. This is the best way to find out if a file is where you think it is in the directory. And once again, it comes back with a file info, which is just like metadata on that file, which is like, what the size is it a directory, what's its permissions and stuff like that. I'm not using it, so once again, with Go, if you're not going to use a variable, you use an underscore. But I am interested in the error, and then there's this function called is not exist. And if that's true, then because this thing will come back and we'll give it an error, and then this is just to verify. This is just another function that they created to say, hey, if that error is of this type error, then this is a true statement, and we're going to come into here and then continue, and you can put the new file. So if I load and I put Amex 0814 2022, and I just put CS instead of CSV, you'll see that file not found. Press enter to try again, and then we're back up here at this loop, and we're going to try again. Once you found the file, then we're going to load up the accounts and print them out so that you can choose which account you want to load these under, because a transaction takes an account ID. So we read in the accounts, and then we load the transactions. And I've put that under this account transactions right here. Let's close the data. So we're going to send in this load transactions under account transactions. We're going to send in the account and the string to the file. And then once it's all done, you're going to see this message, file loaded, press enter, continue, and then you can come back up and maybe do another file and process another file, and then or exit, E for exit, and you're done. So let's go into account transactions. Just so you know that I added model and a file, some other but we're not going to use those. So you can go in there and look at it. We'll talk about that in a minute. But let's just go into the actual loading of this file and saving off the transactions. And as you can see, I am going to grab all the account columns, which, once again, is are these right here. So I'm going to get these records by account number, by account ID, and then I'm going to read in my file. Now, I have this skip header, which is true, and what that does is if it's going through each line, if it has a header, then I want to not process it because this is not a number, right? So this was the way that I skip it. Now, what I like to do is, as I'm running along, and if there's something like this would be nice to have, but I'm going to do something like this and hard code it, then I just do a to do, and then I can come through and I can search for to dos and see what I might want to work on, and maybe expand or make better my code and functionality. So I just put a little note to remind me what I want to do. You'll see that I have a couple of those, and this might be something that you might want to try out and put on, put together and do, and see if it works for you. And one of the things that I have this to do is using this, what's in the model file, to make sure that you only load this file once. You wouldn't want multiple transactions, duplicates in your code, so you only allow one file to load. So that's another thing that might be optional that you might want to work on. And then once I've read this file, it goes into, if we've gone over the read file again, the contents is this byte array. And then I'm going to split using this bytes package that's from Go. And it's like a string manipulation, but for byte arrays. So it has a split and has a join and has pretty much all the other functions that if you went to strings, that you'll see the same, but it's done on the byte array. But you'll see that on the split, the separator is a byte array, unless you know what that one is for a new line, because we're going to split on every line in this file. You have to cast it to a byte array, and that's what I'm doing there. Sorry, right here. I'm doing it two places. So once again, I'm using, on this range, I'm using both the index and the copy of what's in that index. And this is the only place I'm using the index I, and it's for the skip header. Basically, hey, if I'm barely starting out and I'm skipping this header, continue. Once the first line goes away, this will always be false and will never go in here. Then if there's no line, if the length of the line is 0, it will skip it also. I should probably trim that too, but once again, this is something that you could work on, and it's a good one. So we'll just do that. So to do, what if the line has spaces? Okay. And then we're going to split that line. If this is all, we continue on, I'm going to split it by a comma separated. Now, once again, you can make this into a variable that you might want to capture, or maybe they give you a pipe. Maybe it's a pipe delimited. That's another favorite separation for data in these files. But But most of the time, when you say, hey, I want a CSV, you get comma separated. So I just hard coded it, but it's something that you can work on. Then what I've done is I have this little function that takes in the count columns, the array of count columns, and I'm looking for transaction date. So once again, these are actually called out, hard-coded by name. And so this little count columns indexed by name is just this little helper function. And here's where I handle the -1 to shift the index to match the index that this is going to be a 0, 1, 2, 3, 4 after I split it. Where in this count columns, that's 1, that's 2, and that's 5. So that's where I'm handling that -1 shift, and I do it one place, and that's the best place kind of to do it, is to find one place and to know that's, that where that business logic is done. So coming back, so I go get the transaction date, and then once I get the index and I say, oh, it's 1, this would be now 0, and I am going to grab the line parts that I split by comma, and I'm going to grab the transaction string. So that's going to give me something, it's going to give me this thing right here. That string then needs to be put into a date. So what I wanted to get done or accomplish is a uniform date. And I do that by taking, because this date could be in a couple different formats. So I just didn't want to keep the string. I was going to take the string, parse it, make it into a real time, and then save that time in my transactions. So I have this another function called account date format. And this is going to be kind of different. And you'll be like, well, why didn't you just, use the number system? Because the package, the time package, what Go does is when you want to parse a string into a date, which you can, you give it a format of what that date looks like. But they use January 2nd, 2006, and the time is 15:04:05. So if your date format looks like that, and you send it into time.parse, which is, if you come look at this, if you send it in time.parse, they actually have some predefined formats, but this short form, for instance, as long as you put it in that format, it'll parse it right. Now, for me on this program, have some person remember what 2006-01-02 didn't seem very practical. So I did the whole year, month date. And that is, if you'll see, that is done in this date format. That's where that all comes in. And so that's one of the things that we could probably work on, is that when we create, when we ask, so if I come into accounts and we ask what the date format is, maybe explain what each one is, but I didn't do that. And so this is just transforming that year into what it is by doing string replace, and then I am parsing that date. And if I have any problems, it will give an error, and I move on. Now that's really not ideal, but because your dates end up going to be a 0 date, which is 00, for the month, or 01, 01, 0001 for the year, and it's just all zeros except for, it's like the first year, or the first month, the first day. But you can fix that. But you'll at least get the message, and it will go on. It doesn't like blow up everything. So description's kind of done the same way. And we're setting this date format string, description, which I'm setting to blank, because if it doesn't find it, it'll still be blank. Amount string is set to 0, and then I grab it from the index or from the line, and then I try to parse it. Now this is where reverse string comes in, and that is sometimes you'll get what you spent is a negative and what you paid is a positive, and we're just going to reverse those, which is just times it by -1 if that reverse sign is true. And I have a little note, and then once that's all done, I've collected everything, I'm going to make a transaction out of the entities, and then I'm going to call create, and I'm just going to do that over and over again. So let's go ahead and get our files ready to go, and I'm going to press enter, and then it asks me which one account I want to associate this with, and this will be my Amex, and file loaded. Press enter to continue. So we're going to go back up, and you'll see that transactions, there they are. And if I go into records, and I go into transactions, and I list, there's all the lists. So one of the other last things I wanted to show you is if I go back up to accounts and I do list that, one of the things that I added since last time, if you go into accounts, for instance, you'll see that this tab writer is a package, a sub package under this text package, and it takes a standard out. It takes a IO writer, which is standard out, the min width, tab width, padding, pad char, and flags, which in this case I did align right. And with this this format print line, or this format print F, those take that writer and what you want to print out. As long as it has some tabs in it, then it will make the columns for you. And so if something like account name was like 20 characters long, it would all shift over and line itself up. And that's what's really cool about it. And so as you can see, I do these two lines once, and then I range through these accounts and do this print print F, and I give it the same values, tab delimited, and then writer.flush flushes it all out. This is very important. You got to remember to do that. And this was the last thing I want to show you. So coming back on optional, projects to work on, if you come back to the transactions, all the to-dos that are in here that you might want to work on. One last one that I wanted to show you was I had a problem with one of these just being an account I copied and pasted, and I was having some problems, saving, because one of these was account, because I copied and pasted this from account, and I didn't change what file name I wanted to use. And how would you fix that? So I have this to do. So some questions around the to-dos. If you want to work on them, there's your extra credit. Hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you next time. Please subscribe to the channel and make sure notifications are turned on.